afternoon, everybody. Hope you've got your coffee with you. I have a new cup. So welcome to Internal Audit. Welcome to Talk to Internal Audit, a dedicated Facebook live stream. I'm Derek Jimison, Director of Regions for the Institute, and today we have a brilliant episode, I hope you think it's brilliant, on climate change. Now you're probably wondering, where have we been for the last month or so? What have we been doing? Is it an extended summer holiday? Well, on September the 24th, no coincidence, it was my birthday that day, we decided to take a short break. We wanted to reevaluate the live streams. We wanted to consider the topics we'd been talking about, how we presented them, our focus within these sessions, and to determine what to do next and how to focus going forward. Well, as you may have noticed on our social media network, on our channels, sorry, we are delighted now to confirm that our live streams are now fully accredited for CPE points, which means by watching these videos, you can qualify for CPE points. We calculate CPE point availability based on the duration of these sessions. So for a half-hour session, which most of these sessions are, that qualifies you for a half CPE point. For 1 hour session, approximately a 1 point. Now, this is good news, I would hope, for those of you trying to get some more CPE points. It certainly is for me, because I have to do them as well. So by watching these videos, you can get, for free, half CPE point. I'm struggling with my CPEs today. We're going to show you and put them on stream every week, our new videos. So from here on, half a point per week, or per showing rather. But the good news is as well, we'll be putting on our old videos onto YouTube, so you can watch them as well. So very, very quickly, if you need, and if you wish, and if you have the interest in it, you can accumulate a good 12, 13 points very quickly. So good news on the CPE point. Good news, I hope, that we're back and we've got more to talk about. And now back to today's topic, climate change. Today's all about climate change. I'm going to tackle it from a few angles. But with this week marking the launch of our new report, Organisations' Preparedness for Climate Change, an Internal Audit Perspective, it was only right that we gave this topic our first focus in the new series of Talk to Internal Audit. After all, whether we like it or not, climate change is here, and it's here to stay, and it's having an effect. And I'll talk about that later as well. It's definitely having an effect. I can talk about personal experience now. So it's coming up the corporate agenda as well. It's coming up every organisation I talk to's agenda. Quicker than some, slower than others, but it's there and it's getting more and more important. The reality is striking home now. Now let me cast your mind back to July the 9th, when Liz Sandwith, my co-presenter on the Talk to Internal Audit, was talking about climate change. It's only 4 months ago. 4 months is a long time this year. A lot has happened in that period. Well, one of the most obvious things that's happened, certainly from my perspective, is summer finished. What a summer it was. It was wet. It's now autumn. It's wet. It's wetter than it was in summer, though, and it's slightly colder as well. So good news, I can tell the difference. It's back to normal. Football has come back over the last 4 months. The crowds haven't, but football's back. And if you're a football fan, that is great news. It just gives you more anticipation to get back to the football itself. With that came more celebrities doing things that were inspirational in many senses to help us get through the crisis, the current crisis of COVID. But we also had the inspirational, inverted commas, celebrities who didn't quite do the right thing the right way and probably embarrassed themselves as much as the organisations and people they work with. For some reason, I'm thinking of football again, and there's plenty of examples there. After months of argument and debate in America, the US election has finally taken place. Well, what a fantastic situation that is, and look what's coming out at the other side of it. Coronavirus. It got better, it got worse, it got better, it got worse. The reality is it's ebbed and flowed as probably many people expected it to, but it's been difficult and it continues to be difficult for us all. It started spreading, we got under control. It started spreading, we're in lockdown, semi-lockdown, tiered lockdown. The word lockdown is continuous. It gives us questions for 2021, questions for this year. Will we have a Christmas? What will it be like? Next year, will we get a vaccine? What will it be like? What will work be like next year? Same, different? And what about 21 in general? What about the climate? Back to the climate. What about weather? Well, I'm going to talk about a couple of specific things here, and I'll come back to them again. Beginning of this year, we had the Australian fires, the forest fires, bushfires, worst they'd had on record, a huge effort to try and help out and try and resolve the issue there. But underlying that, climate issues. We then moved to California and the forest fires, worst in history in many areas. Terrible damage once again, and repetitive terrible damage, because California is now suffering on a regular basis. What about here? Well, I like rain because I don't have much choice in Glasgow, but we've had the wettest October on record, possibly the wettest October on record, wettest day in October, and the wettest month in October, sorry. What about food? Well, crops. I thought I'd look at some crop stats for this year, see if there's been a difference there with the rain. Yes, there has. Wheat crop is down 20%. Rapeseed oil is down 27%, and oat yield is down 19%. And if you like your porridge, oat yield is an issue for you. I like my porridge. Less production, less crop, higher prices, availability is an issue. This is not the start of something. This has been happening for years, but it will pick up pace. What does next year promise in general for us? Well, it definitely promises more weather. Yeah. It definitely promises more politics here and abroad, and in the US as well. It definitely promises an economy which will only go in one direction, and that isn't north, and that will be very difficult for us all. It definitely promises more climate change and more extensive impact on us as well. That's reality. On top of that, in this very time next year, barring any further postponements, COP26 will be taking place in Glasgow, 4.5 miles from this chair and less than half a mile from my daughter's house. COP, Conference of Parties, a major conference with many, many countries being represented, many senior politicians being represented, making a big play for what we have to do going forward. And there will be some significant stakes in the ground around this. This will be a major event, and it's shaping up to be a milestone event. You will have heard of the Paris Agreement. There's a lot of aspiration in Scotland that we have the Glasgow Agreement coming out of this, a major international agreement for change for the future, for good. Things have been happening. This is what's been happening around me. So today I'm actually going to focus on 4 aspects of the world around us, if you like, relating to climate, and how they relate to each other and how they relate to what's going to happen in the future and what we can do as auditors. I'm going to reflect on a climate reality check. I'm not going to get in great detail, but just give you some context. I'm going to reflect on some of my personal experiences and reflections over the last 6-7 months, but particularly the last 2 days, to be honest. I'm going to focus also on general changes that will come about as a result of our internal audit report on climate change, because that has significant differences for us all. And I'm also going to reflect on the future and what can happen in the future, because there's a lot can happen for us in the future that is good and better. So focusing first on a climate reality check. Now, I could throw lots of facts and figures at you here, and I'm not trying to do that today, but what I'm going to do is share a couple of facts and figures, because I think it's very important that we just understand a couple of things that auditors like to understand, facts, because we like to go and measure against facts, reality checks. In 2008, the UK made a commitment to reduce emissions in response to a climate change commitment. Now that's great. We made a commitment. We made something that is tangible, it's on paper. And as auditors know, it's great to actually measure things and identify gaps and make recommendations for improvement as well. 2016, we had the Paris Agreement, where the UK subsequently certainly ratified it, made major commitments to reduce emissions and to help maintain temperature rises to within 2 degrees of what we had previously. 2 degrees doesn't sound much, but as we all know, if we're watching any TV programs nowadays that talk about climate, 2 degrees will have a substantial impact on any and all of us, if and when it comes to pass. And we actually committed to being well within 2 degrees. Not so easy to measure, well within, it's not so precise, but we did commit to do that. And in 2019, the UK went further than it had done previously and committed to reduce its emissions by 100% compared to the level of 1990. Now, previously we committed to 80%. So we upped the ante on ourselves, which is great if you're supporting the agenda here, and it's great that you've got a figure to measure against. So I'm going to reflect a little bit about where are we on that, because in reality, having made commitments, we need to deliver, and that's the space for internal audit. Pardon me. So we made all these commitments. That's my reality check. That's the world we're living in. That's where audit is operating, in a world where commitments have been made, and every one of us lives within commitments. These commitments either locally, because cities have done it as well, or nationally, governments have done it in the UK and in Ireland as well. Space for audit to do its job, if you like. Now, some personal reflections from myself. A lot has changed. A lot has changed over the last few months. But if you go back to July, when Liz Sandwith was speaking on climate, I did a bit of reflection at the time on my own circumstances, what I'd been doing, what I needed to do going forward. And I was actually quite impressed with myself from a very low level, I suppose. But I'd done a number of things that I felt was good. I felt I was making a difference. I was making a difference for my family and therefore for the environment as a whole. I cut back on car usage. We had only one car now as opposed to two. Partly budgetary issues. We didn't need a second car anyway, but partly a commitment to actually drive less. Over and above that, we'd reduced the mileage we were doing. We were walking more. I was getting fitter, which is unusual for me. So that was good. And I felt proud of that. I was eating less red meat, something I've been trying to do anyway, but substantially less red meat, and felt very proud of myself for that. Pat on the back, Derek, well done. And on top of that, we've done the obvious things of changing the light bulbs and keeping the heating under control. And again, I was proud of that. We were making some significant differences in the usage of power in the house. So delighted. Today, I'm wearing a shirt. It's inclemently mild in Glasgow just now, but I would normally be wearing a jumper because I don't believe in sticking the temperature up an extra couple of degrees just because it's getting warmer and I don't want to put a jumper on. Getting colder, I should have said. So I've been doing things that I felt good about. However, last week, I got a bit of a shock. I did an online assessment of my household's environmental impact. I went into that relatively confident that I'd be within the zone of being positive, if you want to call it that. I was confident that I'd get a good message out of it and some inspiration to keep going. No, that didn't happen. What I was astonished to find was that I was ranked as 123% above national average, which didn't go down well in my mind at all. 123%, not good at all. Made me really stop and think. Today, I did something worse. Well, it's better in a sense, but I found a worse result. I did an assessment, again, same assessment, but I based it on my wife and my circumstances when we got married in 1982, a long time ago. Now, compared to then, we are currently using, or currently having, 4.5 times the impact on the environment than we were 38 years ago. That was a stunner for me. How could I make such an impact over these years? And what am I doing that creates 4.5 times the amount of damage that I was causing back then? Simple things that I'm not going to change. When we got married, we didn't have double glazing. The house we lived in, or the flat we lived in, had single glazing, no central heating and one fire. So in the winter, we had frost or ice on the inside of the windows. We didn't have a 16 degrees ambient temperature, which we do now. So I'm not going to go back to that and just have no temperature at all and just freeze every winter. But the reality is things have changed. I need more. I'm using more, 4.5 times more. What am I going to do? I need to do something. One specific family event, though, has actually impacted greater than everything else. And I'm saying this and giving you an example of this because it does make a difference when you hear these things. My in-laws stay in Australia, outside Sydney. My brother-in-law's sister lives there as well. And a number of years ago, she was burnt out of her house in the Blue Mountains, north of Sydney. Unfortunately, forest fires had come to an area of the Blue Mountains they'd never been before, considerably further than they had in the past. And with 24 hours notice, she had to evacuate and came back to our house to find literally nothing left, all possessions gone, and only what she had when she left was available to her now. So a stunningly bad event to happen to anybody. 2 weeks ago, she turned up on TV in Australia. She had moved following that fire to north of Sydney on the coast, and just over 2 weeks ago, she was subject to extreme weather conditions. Sea was high, lots of rain and winds, and unfortunately, she was flooded out of her house and lost all possessions. So for the same thing to happen with different causes, but ultimately climate at the bottom of it, to the same person in less than 10 years is a suddenly bad thing to happen for most people. But it's real to my family now, and it does make a difference in terms of how you think about these things. So I've spent some time talking about personal reflections and personal impact. There's lots I can do, and I'm far more motivated now. Another reflection, I'm going to reflect briefly on our climate survey report. I read that as well a few weeks ago when it first came out, and it starts in the draft format within the Institute. And my overriding view was I was disappointed. Disappointed at what I was reading. I'm going to give you some stats, just a couple of them, because I could throw lots of things at you here. But I'm going to give you some stats. It doesn't tell everybody we're doing a great job here, but I thought I'd share a couple of them just now. The first stat is that 66% of our respondents indicated that climate change is on their company's risk register. That's good. You've got to say it's good. 66% is there. 34% though don't think it's a risk. Is that a question? Is that reality? Should you have nothing to do with climate change on your risk registers? Interesting. 53% of chief audit executives had not discussed the risks or the opportunities, because there are opportunities posed by climate change with their audit committees. So over half of our heads of audit haven't had a discussion. 22% hadn't discussed the risks with the risk committee or the chief executive or the executive committee. Interesting. 68% wanted to see more government intervention in the sense of providing more guidance and direction and requirements, so sets and rules. I would have thought there's an opportunity for them to do it themselves, to be honest. And 49% of our respondents weren't sure if the information that had been given was enough for the organisation, which I also find quite disappointing, that we're just not sure just now. So not a great feeling came out from that set of stats, and there are lots more on that report as well, and I would encourage you to read it. But it told me a few things. It told me there's not enough getting done if you believe it's a crisis, and if you believe things have to get done and have to get some progress and some momentum going. The last thing that disappointed me, and I had another disappointment, was I read the Institute for Government's September report called Net Zero, How Government Can Meet Its Climate Change Target. That's September, less than 2 months ago. Another sense of disappointment, I think, for me. 60% or greater than 60% of those surveyed did not know what net zero meant and couldn't define it in sufficient detail to actually make sense. That makes it very difficult to do anything if you don't know the topic you're talking about. Less than 15% of the survey respondents had a fair or better understanding of what net zero meant and its implications. So of 100%, less than 15 knew enough about the topic to actually effectively do much about it. That's in context with our survey report as well. Combined, not great reading. Hell of a journey to go on if we're going to get momentum and do things here. So I'll stop there and just have a quick theme reminder. If you're just joining us, welcome to our live stream, Talk to Internal Audit, with me, Derek Jimison, Director of Regions for the Institute. Today's theme is climate change. I've just offered some personal reflections from the last few months as to how climate change is impacting and what's being done about it. And now we're going to look a little bit on what we as the Institute can do about it, and the members as well. So now I'm going to talk about our report on it. I've talked about the headlines and some stats, but now into the detail a little bit. As I say, it was a disappointing set of stats for me. There's a but attached to that. It's a what are we going to do about it, but. So the climate change report was written in conjunction with the climate change group that we've been working with for a period of time now. and it was to provide an overview of the organisation's overall preparedness for climate change, the key risks and opportunities associated with climate change for the organisation, and the role internal audit is playing in supporting organisations through this change and to be climate ready. I would absolutely suggest you read this report. It's not the shortest of reports, but it's got information in that which will help everybody. You can download the report by following the link provided in the comment section of this video, and it will ultimately add value. I'm going to focus on 3 or 4 topics within that, though, without getting into great detail, that I think are relevant, and I've touched on them with the stats. The word unsure came across to me as quite a loud word. We're not sure. The organisations aren't sure what to do. They're not sure about the subject. It came through in the Institute of Government's report as well, unsure. We can do a lot about that. Research, read up, talk to people. So it's quite easy to respond to the word unsure by becoming more sure. Go and speak, go and find out, go and read. It's a lot of information there. Become aware of what net zero means and what that actually therefore means for the organisation. Audit committees. Speak with our audit committees. I actually am part of another organisation called Chapter 0. Now that's a group for directors of organisations, and it's talking an awful lot about climate change. That's its purpose, that's its reason for being there. And it's talking a lot in consecutive sessions about impacts and how to help organisations get clear on what to do and how to do it. And as we grow as an institute, not an institute, as an organisation, sorry, many hundred members now, close to 1,000, I think, representing all kinds of organisations, predominantly corporates. We realise that directors themselves have been struggling with the subject. What does it mean for us? How to make it real? What do we do about it? But the clarity is now coming. So speak to the audit committee, have a brave discussion that we don't know too much ourselves. We don't know what you know, but let's talk about it. Talking is the only way of progressing this subject. Have the same discussion with the executive. The stats suggested we're actually having them to a greater extent than the audit committee. So continue that discussion, broaden the discussion out across the organisation, see what the thought process is and try and contribute to it. Get this topic on the risk register. It may be part of a different subject, it may be the result of a number of other things, connectivity across risk register, but it belongs on the risk register. It is a risk, full stop. Get it on the audit plan. We had stats in the report, or we have stats in the report. When you read it, you'll find that we're not doing a lot of audit work. I'm not suggesting for a minute we should spend a huge volume of time on this subject, but it needs to be on the audit plan. The report also gives case studies from a number of organisations who are doing good work in this area. Again, we're not suggesting you do everything they're doing, but just bear in mind what they are doing. It's useful to consider what they're doing and whether you can do some of the same thing. They're making a difference just now. They're adding value. They're doing audit work in this area, and it absolutely is making a difference. I should also reflect that my family's going to do more. I've talked about that already. We're at Shocks. We're going to do more. So there's a positive to the negative. Do more, things will get better. Before I go on, I want to make a quick example of something, not make an example, give an example of something. I was speaking to a head of audit recently, very, very recently, and we were on the topic of climate change and how it might relate to an audit of the strategy of the organisation. He gave me an overview of the intentions within the organisation regarding the organisation's future, what they're going to do in the next few years. And part of that was about moving one of the offices from an in-town location to an out-of-town location. We talked about transport requirements because in my mind immediately, how do you get there became the subject of discussion. Transport, public transport, private transport, costs, environmental impact. And yes, clearly an impact there. But what became apparent through the discussion was the organisation itself had considered environmental impact, but from a direct organisation perspective, just how they saved environmental impact or did less environmental impact. They had looked at the materials of building the property, they'd looked at the heating, looked at the lighting, but they hadn't included the staff's impact, the change in impact from having to drive to get there. And the reality was that previously when working in the town centre, around 200 to 400 staff would use public transport, nearly always a train, to get to the location. The reality now was the vast majority of staff would be driving a car. It may be shared, but it's still driving a car. So the significant difference there hadn't been taken into account of. Now that's the challenge of the organisation is publicising around the place. It's making a massive difference. It's there for the challenge, if you like, by the public. So that type of discussion is very easy to have with an open mind and a general question and answer type discussion, but please have them as well. It does make a difference. What are they going to do now? I don't know. It was just a discussion we had. I don't know what the next step is. Big differences to be made though. If we go around the subject a little bit more, I'm talking about what do we do in the future? Well, the reality is the climate discussion, the Institute of Government has made a number of recommendations for the government to take on about how to support the climate change agenda going forward. These recommendations will not be taken on in their entirety, but they will form the basis of clearer guidance. They will form the basis of actions that will be submitted to COP26. And over the course of the next year, you'll see more and more and more coming, building up to COP26, but also recognising the reality that time is ticking, and this is a ticking time bomb. So the reality for us all is things are going to change. Alok Sharma very, very recently talked about this. He'll be presiding over COP26 from the UK perspective. And the reality around this is we have to get more serious. So audit function can do an awful lot in this space. He talked an awful lot about more organisations and more companies and more countries making more significant commitments over the course of the next year or so. So when we all get to COP26, we're much clearer on a much harder agenda for ourselves. The consideration I think we should give ourselves is, what have we done? Let's look at what we as an audit function have been doing. Has it been significantly strong and thoughtful? Have we been having difficult but constructive discussions with our audit committees and with our executives? If we haven't, should we really do so now? Because I go back to the beginning, our companies have made some commitments, quite often publicly, but our country's made a commitment already. 3 sets of commitments. They've upped the ante to 100% in one case. So given that environment, we're going to have to, because our country has. The reality for us is the companies will have to line up and do more. Stakeholder pressure will be there from shareholders, stakeholder pressure from customers. The reality is, from all sides, pressure is changing now and increasing. So things will get better because we have to do more. The urgency will increase as well. And God willing, with COVID hopefully subsiding over the next period, whatever that period's length might be, this will become very, very clearly our number one focus. That's something we have to do an awful lot about to make things better. So in conclusion, for those who've tuned in, welcome to our Facebook live session, Talk to Internal Audit. Today's episode was all about climate change, the most acute challenge facing us and our environment and the world today. To address the subject, I've looked at 4 areas. I've talked about the climate change report. I've talked about reflections on myself. I've given us a bit of reality check, and I've talked a little bit about what can we do going forward. If you haven't read our report as yet, please do so today or tomorrow, but please read it soon. Please consider what it means for you as an organisation. And I've also provided the link to the report in the comment section of the video, so it's accessible, very, very accessible to you. If you haven't already done so, going back to the beginning of this video, please make sure you can claim, and you do claim, your CPE point for today, your half point. And please do watch the previous videos as well when they become available. The opportunity to get 12 CPE points for free doesn't come along very often, but it's here now and it will continue to be here. Details of our next Facebook Live session will follow very soon, but in the meantime, you can continue to watch on the existing YouTube channel. If you have questions, you can contact me directly at derek.jimison@iia.org.uk. Please remember, talk to Internal Audit because the Institute is listening. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't finished your copy, please do so now. Goodbye and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.